Okay, guys, so we have gone through Donking the flop, 20 big blinds versus EP, Donking the flop, 20 big blinds versus hijack, Donking the flop, 20 big blinds versus button. We've done the same at 30 big blinds, and we've also looked at 60 big blinds. We've looked at when to use big sizes, when to use small sizes, when we potentially want to just pot the flop, which hands fall into different categories, how to play turns, how to play rivers, main drivers for when we want to triple barrel big, main drivers for when we want to triple barrel small, different turn textures, river textures. So I think we've gone very comprehensively through a lot of stuff there. This is now going to be playing shallower stack sizes. So you can see that we have the same thing versus the button versus EP, but something which is going to be very different here is we're going to have donk shoving. So you can see we have donk total and then donk shove. So if you remember 20 big blinds, button versus big blind versus button, we have donks up to 76% frequency. However, here our highest donking frequency for 10 big blinds is going to be 53% frequency. At 12 big blinds, it's going to be 51% frequency. At 15 big blinds, it's going to be 46% frequency. So at these shallower stack depths, we're going to start playing a lot differently. We're going to be a lot more passive, and we're going to be playing a very different strategy. So if you just imagine 30 big blinds deep, we have a board like 7-6-5. A hand like King 5 or Queen 5, these are hands which don't really want to get into 30 big blinds or 20 big blinds. But when you get to 10 and 12 big blinds, things change a lot. Once you have 10 big blinds and you have bottom pair is just seen a lot of the time as essentially the nuts. We just go with our bottom pair. So the pot size that we're going to win, then the pot size that we're trying to protect, and the equity that we're trying to fight for, this is going to be so huge relative to our stack. And it's going to be at a stage of the tournament often where we're looking to preserve. So when we have maybe, 40 big blinds, 50 big blinds, 60 big blinds, when we flop bottom pair, it's all about, just not playing a big pot, just like maybe playing a small pot, nudging it up a little bit, trying to just play small, trying to play a little bit small ball, trying to just shift our equity just a little bit. However, when we play shallow stacked, it's completely different. We're all about trying to deny as much equity as possible and running our equity also for value as well, because when we have bottom pair, no one can get off our hand. When we have middle pair, nobody can get us off our hand. However, when we're 30 big blinds deep or 60 big blinds deep, it starts getting a lot different. So what we're going to look at here is straight away, we're going to put up a sim, we're going to load the tree up. We have single raise pots, 10 big blinds deep, big blind versus button here, you can see, and we're going to pull this up. Just give us a second. It'll take 1 second. So we have this. We're going to pull up the most frequent board, and we're going to look at 7-6-5. We can see on 7-6-5 we have 50% total donk, and 35% of our overall strategy is going to be a shove. So we're only going to donk non-all-in around about 15% of the time. We're going to check around about 50, and 30% of the time we're going to shove. So let's have a look at this 7-6-5 rainbow board. 7-6-5 rainbow, and we're going to look at the tree. So yeah, 50% check, some smaller sizings a little bit, but even then again, we don't go for this really small bet. If you remember, at 30 big blinds, 20 big blinds, 60 big blinds, whatever, we have a lot of, the smallest sizing is our most frequent size. And we can see here, we're essentially, even when we pot it, we're essentially going to be all in anyway, because we're putting in most of our stacks. So we can see basically we're going to be like 50% check, 50% shove. And the main difference is, like I spoke about previously, is our 5x just runs it. So our queen 5, our king 5, our king 6, our queen 6, our jack 6, our 10-6, we just run it here. Because we're going to get called by lots of hands that we do really well against. And we're going to fold out hands which have good equity against us, which are going to have a very heavy check back frequency. So first of all, I just want to show you that when we check ourselves, our opponent is going to have a really, well, not really small, but it's going to check back not too much. It's going to have a 75% betting frequency. So this is if we have lots of shoves ourselves. If we shove all of our 6x, shove all of our 5x, shove all of our 4x, shove in all of our 7x, shove in all of our 8x, then it's quite obvious, right? We've shoved so many hands which would normally check shove. Like most people check a hand like jack 6 and then just shove over a c bet. But because we've eliminated all of these from our range, our opponent doesn't need to have the fear of getting check shoved on when he has a hand like, say, Jack 10. Jack 10 can easily just bet and not worry about Queen 6 shoving on it and folding out a bunch of equity, or 8x shoving on it, or anything like that, because all of those hands have already shoved. So in position gets to bet with a lot more confidence. I'm going to do some node locking, and I believe that this check-in frequency is going to increase a lot once I node lock out of position to not be open shoving on the flop. So we can see here, let's see what happens. So we go in for 80. Remember, the pot size is 5.5 big blinds, and we're going all in for 8 big blinds because we started the hand 10 big blinds effective. This is a very common thing which we're going to see. Someone opens off 30 to 40 big blinds, we defend off our 10 big blind stack, and then we open shove the flop. This is going to be very common. So again, just to remind, we're shoving all of these 4x, all of these 5x, all of these 6x, all of these 7x. The hands which we slow play are, the complete nuts, like 8-9, which is a straight. We have 7-5, 6-5, 7-6. These are two pairs. But you can see we also slow play hands like 8-5, hands like 8-6. If you remember at 30 big blinds, these are boards which we actually push loads of money into the pot. So when we play 30 big blinds or 60 big blinds, we do more check-in with Queen 5 and Queen 6 because we want our opponent to improve, because there's more EV of us coolering our opponent on a later street. But because we're shallow, we don't care about future EV of coolering our opponent. The main driver here is about protect equity denial. And these guys had like 8-5 and 8-6, which previously wanted to blast loads of money in as soon as possible. They now, because we're so shallow, they really want to just slow play and trap and help protect a lot of these hands in our range, like Queen Jack off, Queen Jack suited, whatever else to check. If you imagine that we shoved all of these, and we just left essentially hands with very little equity, then in position has a really easy counter strategy, right? He would just basically check 0% of the time and just stab everything for a min bet, and we would just be folding way too much. So this is something which I want to show, that our equity here is going to be, it's going to be more than that, I'm sure. Our equity here is going to be 49.2 like previously, but our EV is going to be 27.3. Out of position's EV is going to be, in position's EV is going to be 26.6. So even though we have an equity disadvantage, we have an EV advantage by having so many shoves on the flop. When we do go for a shove here, we can see that our opponent, we make him fold the Jack 10s, the Queen 10s, the King Jacks, the Queen Jacks, the King Queen. So when we shove ourselves with, say, King 8 or King 9 or Queen 8 or Queen 9 or Jack 8 or Jack 9, we're folding out hands which dominate us here a lot. And something here which I always find really interesting is we're folding out 10-9 and Jack-9 offsuit, which is massive. These hands have such huge equity. If you think about it, we're shoving a hand like Jack-4. So if you go back here, I believe we're shoving a hand like Jack-4 full frequency. So we're shoving an up and down straight draw of Jack-4, and we're making Jack-9 fold. And Jack-9 has to fold because if you think about our 9x, we either have 9-7, which kills Jack 9. We have 9-6, which kills Jack 9. We have King 9, Queen 9, Ace 9. All of our 9x dominates 10-9 and Jack 9. They're in really, really bad shape versus our shoving range. And then it also allows us to shove our Jack 4s, our 10 4s, our Queen 4s, our King 4s. So we shove these hands, King 4, Queen 4, Jack 4, and we get, just to remind ourselves, we're going to get these hands like King Queen, King Jack, Queen Jack, King 10, Queen Jack default. That's a massive win. When the pot size is so big relative to our stack, folding out hands which absolutely dominate us is a massive, massive win. So just to remind ourselves of the equity, we have 49% equity and our EV is 27.3, where our opponents have more equity but lower EV. This is very rare in PO to find this kind of thing going on. So what I'm going to do now is take out the bet size, take out these donks, and take out all in as well. We're going to build the tree back up, and we're going to check how does our EV change it, because I believe our EV is going to change drastically once again. So we're going to press go, and I'm going to be back with you. I could let this run, and one of the best things about running shallow stack sims is it doesn't take long, because it's such an easy sim to run. It doesn't run like turn check raises and river check raises, etc. You can see that it's going to run in basically 1 minute or less. So you have no excuse to be not running loads and loads of shallow stack sims. Anyway, I'm going to let this run to a decent frequency here, and then we will come back and have a look. Okay, so this is still loading now. I'm just going to press stop in a second once it goes down a little bit more. I believe something we're going to see here is that imposition's range and strategy is going to change a lot because we don't have uh because we have more a stronger range. I believe imposition is going to check back, and therefore he'll get to realize loads of equity with loads of hands, and then his EV should increase and our EV should decrease. That's what I'm assuming here. So let's go back to the browser. This should have loaded up in just 1 second. Okay, so we're checking here. Our equity is going to stay, our equity is going to stay 49.2. Our opponent has just over 50. Our EV was 27.4, I believe. Wow, what a huge drop off. It's dropped off to 25.3. So again, this is a big, big change. I think our opponent had like 26.2 or something. And look at that. By not having a shove in range, our opponent's EV just goes up so, so drastically, and we've decreased so drastically. So if we allow ourselves to have shoves on the flop, we are going to have an EV advantage, even though we have an equity disadvantage, and our opponent is going to have an EV disadvantage, even though he has an equity and a positional advantage, which is crazy. And yeah, this just shows us a lot. And when we check, I believe his check-in frequency is going to go up a lot to like 80%. Yeah, 75%. And you can see he plays only shove and check. So basically, he gets to realize 100% of equity. Well, not 100% because we play a turn, but he gets to realize so much equity with every hand. He doesn't have a single hand that he's bet folding on the flop. So on the flop, not a single hand that he has is going to lose equity going to the turn. Whereas when he shoves, we're folding 40% of our range, which has equity. So a hand like Jack free, Queen free, King free with the backdoor flush draw, Queen 9, which is an overcards and gut shots. We're folding equity here. He's forcing us to fold equity with 40% of our hands, whereas he is realizing equity with 100% of his hands because he has no small bets. He plays shove or check. And this is another really good thing to teach us, that at shallow stack depths, equity denial and equity realization is such a crucial concept. So yeah, again, I'm going to just go back to this sheet, and this is 10 big blinds. So 10 big blinds, 765, it was 765 rainbow. So donk shoving, let's just do it here. We can see also at 12 big blinds, it's essentially the same thing. So essentially the same thing. We even shove even more. So that's kind of interesting. Why are we shoving more at 12 big blinds? Surely at 12 big blinds, the equity realization is less important than at 10 big blinds because it's a less relative portion of our stack, right? So what I believe is going to happen is, let's just go back to 10 big blinds. Let's see how often imposition is supposed to fold when we shove. So just pull up any tree here, 765 rainbow. So 765 rainbow, we shove the flop here. So when we shove the flop, our opponent is only supposed to fold 25% of the time. He calls 75% all in. He calls every ace X all in, most of king X all in, all of the gut shots here, all of the really good gut shots, all the up and down straight draws, the jack fours, the queen fours. Remember, when we're shoving queen 6 ourselves, we're also getting called by hands we do fucking amazing against too, like queen 4 and jack 4, etc. So he's only folding 25% of the time because he gets such good pot odds against our range. However, when we're going to change this to 12 big blinds, so let's just do a loaded tree up, I believe it's going to have a higher frequency folding range because he's going to get worse pot odds. That's what makes sense to me. So let's just pull this up and do 765 again. Again, I'm looking at this with you in real time. So we shove again, we're shoving around 40%, checking around 50%. So we shove here again. We see now we're shoving 100 into 54, and our shoving frequency has gone up to 38 from essentially 35. So this is a small increase, but naturally you may assume that it would be a decrease because we're fighting for a less relative percentage of our stack. So straight away here, our opponent is folding 40% instead of 25%. So many of our hands just have so much more fold equity. So a hand that was shoving on the flop here, such as say queen 9 or jack 8 or a jack 4. A jack 4 starts to suddenly have a lot more fold equity when we shove. So the EV of shoving jack 4 at 12 big blinds is going to be a lot better than at 10 big blinds. So when we shove the jack 4, we're folding out the jack 9 suit. So look at this, man. We're folding out jack 9 of hearts. Jack 9 of hearts is 2 overcards, a backdoor flush draw, and a straight draw. Like, we're folding out amazing equity. So this just means EV of our hands like Jack fours and Queen fours and King fours are going to go up so much because our opponent is folding the hands which dominate us so much on the other end of the straight draw. So that's pretty amazing to me. So our equity here should be 49.2 still. Yes, it's still 49.2. Our opponent has 50.7. Our EV is 27.36 and our opponent is 26.64. So what I'm going to do again is take out the bet sizes here, take out the all-in, take out these donks, and just make our basic strategy. When we just play the basic strategy that our opponents will likely be playing, we're going to have a look at how the EV will drop off. Again, I think it was 27.3 was our EV, and our equity obviously is not going to change too much. I'm just going to let this load, be back in 1 second. All right, we're back. I'm going to stop this now so it's real time. Don't get accused of whatever. I'm assuming it's not. Yeah, sure. I assumed it wasn't stopped. So we're going to stop and let's look at our equity should stay again 49.2. I always just look at this just in case something's like messed up, just to go to and also just a reminder that imposition does have this like equity advantage plus positional advantage. And wow, look at this drop off again. It's dropped off a lot, and impositions increase so much as well. So like what we can kind of learn from this is that out of position is seen as a bad thing when you are deep stacked, but when you're shallow stacked, it's actually an advantage to have the positional advantage of being able to be the first one to put the money into the pot. That's what we're kind of learning from this as well. Because we're putting money in, and then they are the ones who are then forced to fold equity, which is pretty fascinating to me as well. So yeah, this is it's going to be the same thing. I assume that imposition starts checking back a lot more. Yeah, so imposition, even at 12 big blinds, imposition is still playing check and shove. And this is a big lesson for us too, because at 12 big blinds, there's not many people who are 2x pot shoving the flop. Like, people are just checking here. For sure, people are just checking here. At 10 big blinds, I can see people potentially open shoving. At 12 big blinds, I just don't see it happening as much. So this to me is really, really, really fascinating. And in game, I probably am bet folding hands too much. I'm probably like taking some hands and like bet folding, or maybe betting like my bottom pair and then like folding to a shove or something like that. We see here, we just shove our top pairs, shove our gut shots, shove our over pairs, which makes sense, and then we trap the rest of our range. Because we can call, like when it goes check, check, and the turn is, let's say, a queen Badugi, we can see that when out of position bets, say 27, we can still continue with like 75% of our range or whatever. So we can still play lots and lots of turn cards. So we can slow play our over pairs, we slow play our nuts, we slow play our sets, we slow play our two pairs. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I really think that we're not just learning here how to play out of position, we're actually learning how to play in position versus what we assume population are playing. So yeah, I think this is really interesting. What we're going to do next is compare 15 big blinds. So we're going to go 15 big blinds, button versus big blind, and pull up 765 again. So 765 rainbow at 15 big blinds, and see again, our shoving frequency has gone up, even though the pot we're fighting for is a lower percentage of our stack size. So we're shoving even more. So we're shoving all of our 6x, all of our 7x, our 4x, these low 6x, with no kicker. Again, all of our 8x, all of our 9x, our offsuit combos here at full frequency, essentially. Our bottom pair doesn't go into the shove, but we just shove all of our draws at a higher frequency because we have more fold equity, right? So when we shove queen 4 and king 4, we're going to fold out more hands that dominate us and get it in a lot better. So we're going to see here, we're going to shove for 130 into 5, and we're going to fold out again these 10-9s, jack-9s. We're going to fold out also ace, jack, ace, queen, ace, king, which are going to call when we're shallower. So folding out these hands when we have king 4, queen 4, jack 4, that's a fucking huge win. These are offsuit combos, so many combination of hands. Queen 9's folding, jack 9's are folding. This queen 9 wasn't folding before. This was calling at 10 and 12 big blinds. So this is a massive thing. We can see the folding frequency has gone up to 50% for imposition. So let's have again, do we still have an EV advantage even though we have an equity disadvantage? So we have 49.2, the ranges haven't changed. We have 26.8 EV, And our opponent, so in position actually has the slight EV advantage when we do get shallower, and a lot of this is going to be is because we don't have the EV, just basically pushing our EV with the 5x here. This is playing mostly as checks. So what we're going to do again is take out the add all in and see how things change for in position. Will in position just play shove and check on the flop or not? Because this is really important too. I want to look at how both positions play. So we're going to build this tree and I'll be back in just 1 second. Let this run. It'll take a little bit longer because we're a little bit deeper. Okay, this is, like I said, it loads a bit smaller the deeper you are, of course. So I'm going to let this run down to a route now and we're going to press stop. 0.25 is definitely very accurate anyway. So we can see here, we're checking our range. We've node locked it correctly. Our equity should be 49.2. It is, should be a slight advantage for in position. And we actually had an EV disadvantage before, and we've still gone down a lot. And in positions, EV goes up to very, very high. 28.8 is really high. What we're intrigued about here is how in position plays when we go check. So again, this is really, really interesting. In position has no small betting or even half pot. Often when you're 15 big blinds deep, you'll see, lots of small betting or min betting, because it's a very efficient bet size. But you can see here that once we start not putting money in ourselves, in position's main drivers for the hand and why his EV becomes so high is because he doesn't lose any EV with any hand. He realizes all the equity with every hand going into the turn. So we can see here that essentially when he shoves, I'm forced to fold 60% of hands. So Queen 4 suited, which is an open-ended straight draw with backdoor flush draw and an overcard, this is folding. Like, this is a hand which has so much EV, so much equity, and we're just folding on the flop. So here's a really efficient strategy here. Same with my kings. I'm folding king 6 versus a shove. I mean, I'm folding queen 6, king 6, a6. That kills me. That really, really kills me. Like, I can't just fold these hands and allow him to dominate me with this strategy. So yeah, hopefully I've gone through why shoving is so crucial. We're going to look at some other boards which have high frequency donk shoves. So we can see here 765, 765, 765, 765, 876, 875, 875. All of these boards, you can see all of these boards up to the 9 high. It's the same concept. It's doing the same thing. One thing which I do think is quite interesting is there's some boards which we don't necessarily want to. So these ones here stand out to me, right? So King 7-5. King 7-5 wants to donk, shove 2% of the time, but it wants to donk total 50% of the time. So this is like crazy. I'm like, King high donking, why are we doing this? And we're going to look into this now. It's actually very, very fascinating. It's got a lot about, if we remember back to the 30 big blind range that we spoke about, when we get to the turn, on high cards we want to put the pot a little bit up, and on low cards we really want to blast the pot up. And here it's a very, very similar concept. We're going to look into it now. I can actually just pull it up. So we're going to go to loading the tree, 10 big blinds, 10 big blinds, big blind versus button. Pull up anyone. King 7-5 flush draw, right? So King 7-5 flush draw. We can do any one. It doesn't change too much. And we're going to see here that we have basically no shoves, but we have lots of hands which want to put in a little bit of money. And what's very, very important to realize here is that when you have a king, you don't want to just protect your equity. When you have a king, you're very determined to not realize your equity, but to get value from loads of hands in position's range. So when you have a king, you're not vulnerable. When I have a hand like Queen 6 on 7-6-5, in position has loads of gut shots, loads of open-ended straight draws, lots of hands with 2 overcards and a backdoor flush draw. On King 7-5, when my opponent has Jack 9, he's basically drawn dead against my King X. When he has Queen 10 offsuit, he's basically drawn dead. However, Queen 10 offsuit on 7-6-5, it even has a backdoor straight draw. It has 2 overcards. So when I have Jack 4 against Queen 10, I want to get Queen 10 the fuck out of my pot. But when it's a king high board, we really want to just get max value with our king high. This also allows us to get protection with our low pairs. So if we take a hand here like 5-4 or 6-4 or 6-5 or let's look at some more 5x hands. Like Queen 5 and King 5 is an obvious one. These 5x hands, 10-5 suited, whatever it may be, we want to just basically nudge the pot up a little bit, get a little bit of value with our hand, and fold out some hands. So when we bet 11 here, I imagine in position's going to have not too much fold equity. Yeah. So in position is basically not folding at all. I believe this is quite unrealistic. I believe in position will be folding hands like Queen 10 without a diamond, hands like Jack 10 without a diamond, hands like Queen 4 suited without a backdoor flush draw. Okay, they're folding those anyway. But yeah, that kind of hand range, like Queen 8 offs, folding more of these, 10 8 offs, folding more of these, 10 9 off. Like 10 9 off here is calling 92% of the time, and I just don't believe this will happen. But even though this doesn't happen too much, we still have a 50% leading range on the flop, mixing between this kind of half pot and small sizing, but typically using a smaller sizing for our hand. Which hands are checking? We can see our 7x also wants to get some more value in, and this is quite interesting. Our 5x wants to just put the pot up a little bit. Our King X wants to get value, but our 7X really wants to get that kind of fold equity. So we can see here that when we bet a hand like 9-7 for this half pot, we're going to get more fold equity. So a hand like a 7 really kind of wants to get the fold equity and also wants to get called and get a bigger bet in, because a 7 has a lot more that it wants to protect against. When we have a 5, we can't really afford to put loads of money into the pot because we're going to be up against a lot of 7x, right? A lot of 7x beats us, pocket 6s beat us. A hand like 8, 9 or whatever else has more equity than it will do against a 7, I guess, or like a Queen 10, etc. You can get counterfeited, whatever else it may be. So a 7x kind of likes to put in a bet here, but I believe that if we node lock, so if we just node locked our opponent to be folding, say, 15 or 20% of the time versus a small bet, I believe 7x would then start to put in a smaller bet rather than a half pot bet. And yeah, you can node lock yourself and have a look. I'm pretty sure that's what the case will be. So these king high boards are really, really interesting and really fascinating to us. I believe that we want to have this small size, and it's also teaching us this theoretical concept of, high cards, less protection, use a smaller bet. Low cards like 7-6-5, we have more hands which just want to get as much money in as soon as possible. We're going to use a bigger bet sizing. So I think this is quite interesting. So going back here, let's look at some other boards which will be similar. So we're basically looking at boards which have high donk totals but low donk shoves, because all of the middle boards we basically want to shove most of the time. But this king 7-5 again, king high board again, king high board again, king high board again, king queen high board. King queen 9 is actually a pretty interesting one. We can look into king queen 9. I think that's an interesting one to look into. But again, there's a lot of king queen X actually. But the common driver that we can see here is that king high boards really want to put bets in, because again, let's look what happens when we check. When we check, our opponent checks back 34% of the time. So we allow him to check back a lot of ace high, a lot of hands like 9-8, which is definitely going to call a bet. So this is pretty interesting to me for sure. But what we're going to look at now is a board of king queen 5, I believe would be one of the boards. So king queen 9, actually. King queen 9 is a very interesting board for me, I believe. Just going to take this out. So king queen 9. Is it rainbow or is it not rainbow? King queen 9 with a flush draw. So let's have a look at king queen 9 with a flush draw. King queen 9 with a flush draw. You can just do any, it doesn't matter which flush draw it is. It can be this one, sure. So let's have a look. We can see here we have a lot of lead-in. So this is kind of interesting. So this is actually a really interesting board texture. So our King X is really, really incentivized to put bets in against hands which our opponent will start checking back. So I believe that our opponent will maybe check back some 9x and queen x when on the flop. So if he checks back some 9x and queen x, our King X hates that. And I guess ace x is also checking back. So King X really wants queen x and 9x to put in an uncomfortable amount of chips. I believe when he goes check, check, yeah, our opponent is checking all of its queen x essentially. It's checking all of its 9x. It's checking all of its ace high. So our range, when we have a king is a really, really important part of our range on the flop here. Getting max value with a king is so crucial for us. So we're saying when we have a king, we're like, whoa, wait a minute. We're not allowing queen x to check back. We're not allowing 9x to check back. We're not allowing ace x to check back. So we go for the half pot bet. And when we go for the half pot bet, we get called by all this queen x. All the 9x continues. The ace jack, the ace 10. I believe that when we check the flop, Yeah, ace, jack, ace 10. These are hands which are ace 9 as well. Pocket pairs. This is another crucial one. All the pocket pairs are checking back. So instead of just saying, well, we're not allowing your pocket pair to just realize your equity, we're going to put in a bet ourselves. So we put the bet in ourselves and we fold out these hands which have, some equity, which are not going to put money into the pot later. We get called by all the ace X, we get called by all the queen X, we get called by all the 9X, which I think is going to be a crucial part of this strategy. Again, looking what happens when it goes check by us. Our opponent, I believe, is going to check back the 9-7s, the 9-6s. We're like, no, this is not happening, not on our watch. So this is a really, really nice thing to see, that our King X is a main driver, King 2 offsuit. We unblock, when we have King 2, we unblock all the queens, all the 9s. And you can see that we actually choose, like when we have King 9 ourselves, and we have Queen 9 ourselves, we slow play these hands because we block the hands which are going to slow play, and we block the hands that we need to get equity and value against. But when we have King 2, we're like, whoa, wait a minute. We have King 4, like, wait a minute. We unblock the queens, we unblock the 9s, we unblock the 10s, we unblock the jacks, we unblock the clubs, we unblock the ace X. We want to get as much money in as soon as possible. So let's look what happens with yeah, so even these hands like ace 5, ace 4s, which don't allow any ace X to realize equity, which is going to be nice to see. Again, we've gone through the pocket pairs, all the 9X, all the queen X. Hands like 10s and jacks are checking back. We're like, whoa. We're not allowing 10s and jacks to check back. So when we go for the bet 27, our opponent is, of course, never going to fold 10s or jacks when he has it. Sorry, it should be like this. He's never going to fold 10s or jacks. Obviously, never. He has 9s, it doesn't matter. Kings, it doesn't matter either. So yeah, this is a really important thing, I believe. And so many offsuit combinations here, so many of these hands, even a hand like Queen 8, even a hand like Jack 8 and 10 8, which doesn't want to like bet fold the flop. We force these hands to continue or to fold. We fold our equity or we get continued 50% of the time, which is going to be pretty crucial for us. So hopefully I've gone through why Donk shoving the flop is going to be good in certain ways. And I've also gone through the different stack sizes, 10, 12, and 15 big blinds, these low medium boards. But I've also covered when we want to donk basically non-all-in. So we want to donk non-all-in, and we can see this king, queen high. It also extrapolates into 12 big blinds. It also extrapolates into 15 big blinds as well. We don't want to be donk shoving, but we want to have a lot of donks there. So let's just have a little look at 15 big blinds. 15 big blinds, king, queen X. Let's see how we're going to play. So we're going to do a single raise pot, 15 big blinds, and we're going to do king, queen, 9 again, flush draw. Let's just do, doesn't matter which one we do, it doesn't matter at all. So we're going to do here, again, we're going to see we're having these betting here. We're going to check more often. Our King X is not driving as much money in, but it is driving some money in. And we can just see our bluffs here, by the way. The hands which are really nice bluffs are our 10X and our Jack X. This blocks hands like Queen 9, it blocks 10-9, it blocks jacks, it blocks 10s, it has equity, it unblocks ace X, which it's going to get folds from, I guess. So when we bet 27, we get folds from the 8X, we get folds from the underpairs. So yeah, it's quite nice. We get folds from some jack 8s, which dominate us, some 10-8s, which dominate us, ace 8s from all of these ace high offsuit combos. So we fold out 30% of the time when we have a hand like jack 4. It's pretty good for us, right? When it does go check from us, our opponent is now starting to put more smaller bets in, but we can see he's still checking back all his Queen X. He's still checking back all his 9X. He's still checking back all of his underpairs. He's still checking all of his ace X. So we do have something which really, we do have a hand, we class like King X, which does want to force money in against these hands. Let's look at a slightly different board like King 7-5, Rainbow. See if there's anything going on here. Here, yeah, you can see again we have some betting going on. And again, it's going to be the King X, some Queen X as well, which is quite interesting. I'm intrigued what folds when we bet on this kind of drier King High board. So there's 30% folds, and you can see it's this big block of offsuit combos. So we're trying to choose hands which can maybe, if we choose a Queen 6 suited, which kind of wraps around with backdoor flush draws and blocks some King X and has overcards against the 7 and the 5, we also get to fold out Queen 8, Queen 9, Queen 10, Queen Jack. So by folding out these hands, we have a massive win. We fold out Ace 2, Ace 3, Ace 4 against us. So on this kind of board texture, when we check, our opponent's going to have a very high check back range. So this means he gets to realize lots of equity with lots of hands, like, these queen jack offs, these queen 10 offs, etc. So we just start to lead the flop with some queen X, which wraps around the 7 and the 5. It doesn't really feel too natural in game, right? SPR's free, we're 15 big blinds deep, and we just lead out on the flop. It doesn't feel too natural. But when we think about our opponent is going to be folding 30% of the time, in reality, he may fold even more. A hand like, ace 6 off, 100% frequency continuing, we're probably going to get folds from this. We may get folds from ace 8s. We may get folds from ace 3 suited with no backdoor flush draws. We may get some folds from Jack 10 off, full frequency, etc. Once our opponent starts to overfold just a little bit, our frequency of betting is going to go up through the roof as well. Okay, so we're going to look at which flops from 10 big blinds don't want to donk as much at 15 big blinds, and let's see what the drivers are behind that. So we can see that it drops down a little bit, these king high boards from 50 to 35, being through these ones. The 8-7-6 goes down a little bit. Let's have a look why that is. I'm assuming this is because if we shove 6x on 8-7-6, we're going to just run into the nuts too much. So I believe 15 big blinds, it's not worth shoving our bottom pairs as much. So our frequency is going to go down. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 8-7-6 flush draw, 8-7-6 flush draw. Let's just see which one it was exactly so we can be accurate here. It's with the 7 without the flush draw. So it's this one here. And we can see that we are checking 75% of the time, whereas at 10 big blinds, we're shoving 50% of the time, which is essentially going to be all of our 6x. So let's have a look how we play our 6x. So we can see here, our 6x and our 7x don't even want to shove here. So when you get a very dynamic board where in position has offsuit combos of like straights, like 10-9 off, and just so many hands which are going to call you, which have good equity against your bottom pair, then it means we can't start shoving these hands. So on this, let's have a little look at 7-6-5. So you can see it on 7-6-5, it's fine because our opponent doesn't have 8-9 offsuit in his range, I believe. So we're still donk shoving 33% of the time here at 15 big blinds, whereas 8-7-6, we're going to be going right the way down to 18% donk shove and 24% total donking in general. So that's going to be a big difference. We can see here that there's not going to be too big of a difference between 10 big blinds and 12 big blinds, but 15 is where there starts to be this drop off. So we can see hands we want to shove are going to be our 6x, which has like a 10 to go with it. So that makes sense to me. We're going to shove our 8-5s, our 8-4s, our 8-3s. We just go with these hands. Most of our top pairs, some of our gut shots like king 9 and queen 9. I guess these are very effective because they fill out king jack and king queen offsuit. Same with king 10. But our 7x and our 6x can't just shove its equity here. And again, this is going back to the concept. If you're 100 big blinds deep, you're not going to shove bottom pair because it's not worth it. The pot size is not worth it. You're going to run into too many good hands. At 10 big blinds, it doesn't matter. If you run into a better hand, you run into a better hand. But once you start getting to 15, this is where it starts to become big old trouble. So let's see what happens when we shove. When we shove, our opponent, he's going to call, the 10-9s. He has more jack 8s. He has more of these kind of hands that just are really strong. The ace 10s are calling. It's just not worth it. So when we go back and see our jack 6, for example, when we shove jack 6, it's not as strong. We're also starting to get the EV benefit of improving, right? So when we improve to, let's say like we can see here that 6-5 just wants to go with it, right? But when we improve to, say, queens and 6s or queens and 7s or jacks and 7s and kings and 7s, these are going to essentially be hands that we can start coolering our opponent again. So we start getting back into that territory. So when we do shove the flop, let's see which hands we fold out straight away. So we're basically folding out just hands which we really dominate here. So when we have the jack 6 and the queen 6, we're just folding out these dominated hands most of the time. The jack 9's calling, of course, more often. The queen 9's calling more, of course, often. The jack 10, the queen 10, the king 10. When we have our jack 6, our queen 6, our king 6, it doesn't really matter as much for 15 big blinds. So yeah, we we don't want to shove as much of the time the deeper we get with our bottom pairs and our middle pairs. The shallower we are, we play these bottom pairs and middle pairs way more aggressively. Okay, so what I want to look at next is donk shoving when we're playing against EP, because EP's range is going to be so different to the button's range. The button has more 7x, more 8x, etc. So what I'm intrigued about here and what I find pretty fascinating is we see straight away our donking frequency goes up a lot versus EP, but we shove a lot less. So we have more probably auto folds, I guess, or it's kind of interesting what's going to go on there. So what I'm going to do is sort largest to smallest in terms of hands which we want to donk shove for 10 big blinds versus EP. And we can see here that we go up from 49% to 65%. So that is a big increase. And our donk shoving range doesn't really go down that much. So I think we've just implemented essentially a few more non-all-in donks for 10 big blinds. So we're going to look at 10 big blinds and I'm going to pull it up, the 765. So just going through the ranges here, we can see that EP's range is going to be a little bit tighter. So it's not going to have these hands. It's not going to have these hands. It's not going to have Queen 10 and Jack 10 off. It's not going to have some of the suited connectors. It doesn't have offsuit ace-x. So the range has changed quite a bit. So because of this, we can still see that our donking frequency actually increases, but we don't do as much shoving, but we do a lot of this potting. And this potting is kind of interesting to me. Why are we potting rather than going all in? That's something which is intriguing to me. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to check the EV of our strategy. The EV of our strategy is 29.1. And I mean, this is insanity. This is absolutely insanity. This is EP. Sorry, I get excited about some of this stuff, but our equity here is 49.9 and our EV is 29.1, whereas equity for out of position, in position is 50.05 and in position's EV is 24.8. So just to be clear about this, we have an equity disadvantage, but an EV massive advantage. And this goes back to what I'm trying to say all the time. Positional advantage doesn't necessarily need to be the one about being in position. It could be the one who either is out of position and puts the bet in. It could be the one who range just plays in a certain way. Even though you have lower equity, if you have certain hands in your range, like more offsuit two pair combos, more offsuit straight combos, you can then manipulate the rest of your range to take a lot of EV away from our opponent. But also, I also believe that a lot of the EV comes from this strategy, which I'm trying to suggest here, which in reality, most people probably aren't doing. So when we're going to rerun this, I imagine that our EV decreases significantly. So yeah, what I'm intrigued about is this bet 36. So we have bet 36 with a bunch of hands, like king nines, queen nines, but I'm sure that we're not betting to fold, are we? So let's see what happens. We bet 36. Our opponent goes all in. Okay, we never fold. So what we're essentially doing is getting our opponent to... We generate some EV by getting our opponent to call some hands. So what does he call with? Let's have a look what he calls with. He calls with some queen nine, some jack nine, some 10-8s, some ace threes. Ace three seems like one, some ace king, some ace queen, some ace jack. So when he calls, let's see what happens on the turn. It's kind of interesting. The jack, we go all in with all of our range, and we get some fold. So we're generating... The solver complicates it a little bit to generate a little bit of call flop fold turn, but it's such a small frequency that what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this without any sizing but shoving, I believe. Let me have a look. How much small betting was going on? I think not much again, right? Okay, so some small. So I'm going to take out essentially 66, 50. I'm going to actually just take out everything but shove. See, can we just make this a pure shove strategy rather than having all these different sizes? I believe we might be able to. So right now we are shoving 31% of the time. I'm intrigued to see if that increases. And our EV is 29.1. So let's have a look what happens. I'm just going to take those out and build a tree. And we're going to have a look. So remember, 29.1 and 30% donk shove. So we're going to go and I'll be back in 1 second. Okay, so just stopping this now. It's going to take a second to stop. Just make sure it has stopped. We're going to go back to the browser. Again, we're checking our range. Our equity is 49.9. This is interesting. Our equity doesn't change too much, even though we are against EP rather than the button. It hasn't changed too much here. So our equity hasn't changed much. Our EV was 29 point something. It's now decreased actually quite a bit by not having the smaller sizes. However, our opponent also needs to actually no. What I've done here is essentially have no bet sizes for out of position, I guess. Yeah, out of position is having no bet sizes here. You need to add in one bet size to show it. So our EV for having no donk shoves at all is going to be 27.1. So we've had a huge drop from 29 down to 27, and in position EV has increased a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is just add this bet size of whatever from out of position, percent pot, build the tree again, and see, does our EV switch back now more towards 29 from 27 when we have this all in, or what happens? So we're going to do this, and it'll take just 1 second. Okay, so we're back, and we can see here that, when we load it up, let's have a look. Yeah, when we give ourselves only shove or check, we're going to have this. This is versus EP again. Remember that it's going to look very similar to how we're going to play it against the button. We're going to end up shoving very, 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 very wide. So we're shoving here 60% of the time. So even though in the Excel sheet it tells us otherwise, 10 big blinds, donk shove is potentially going to be, 37% because we're going to have all the different sizings, etc. We don't need to use the other sizings, and our equity is going to stay the same, and our EV goes up substantially. So if you're playing just a check-in range on the flop, I think we had something like 27% EV, and our opponent had around about the same. However, if we have donk shoves versus EP, we're going to have 29% EV, and our opponent drops off to 24. It's one of the lowest we've seen. So we can just see again which hands we want to go for this all in. Most of our 5x, all of our 6x essentially, most of our 7x, a lot of our 8x, all of these. So some of the 5x that we slow play, it seems to be the one with like the backdoor flush draws, like Jack 5 with the backdoor flush draw, because we can improve on the turn, etc. But if you take a hand here like Queen 5 offsuit, or Jack 5 offsuit, or Queen 4 offsuit, or King 5 offsuit, we're just running these hands. So when we do go all in, our opponent is supposed to fold 44% of the time. So he's supposed to fold 44% of the time here, and you can see he's folding all of these overcards. He's folding hands like Jack 9 suited, 10 9 suited again, King Jack off, King Queen off. So I would not start trying to have this pot size bet to try to get some calls on the flop and then folds on the turn, that kind of stuff, or like half pot on the flop. We saw that the fold equity on the turn would end up being something like 4%. So for such a sophisticated change to our strategy, I wouldn't recommend it, and I would go ahead with the shove. And when you are looking for aggregation reports, this is a good lesson. This is a good lesson to be, oh, well, now our shove goes down a lot. Really look into it. Does it actually go down or does it not go down? Because it's going to be quite important. What we're going to look at next is this very, very interesting thing here. Versus EP from the big blind, we are donking 83% of the time. That's huge. That's more than any donk that we get in any situation. And we're now 15 big blinds deep, and it's versus EP. So this is something we're just going to have to look into. So let's look into it. Going to find our single raise pots, 15 big blinds, and we're going to look 765 rainbow, I guess it was. 765 rainbow, yeah. Again, we're going to remember that we're going to also have 765 maybe 83% lead, and a board like 764 is going to be 72. But that's just going to be like we're going to have frequency of hands like 75% instead of 100%. The overall strategy is going to be very, very, very similar. You can see the hands we shove with are going to be very similar as well. So let's have a look what's going on here versus EP. I'm going to find the 765 rainbow. Because from the outset, it looks like we want to have basically no shoves and we want to have loads of small donks, but maybe it's not a small donk. Maybe it's half pot, maybe it's pot, maybe it's whatever. So let's have a look. Should have loaded up now. PS Solver, 765 rainbow, 15 big blinds again. Under the gun's range is going to be somewhat similar. It's going to have this, King 10 off, no Queen 10 off, no Jack 10 off. May not open threes and twos, may open threes and twos. We don't know. Again, we're going to assume someone's opening off a slightly wider stack size. So we're going to have this as the range, and we're going to look at it. So we're going to look at the range, and we're going to see here that we don't really want to have many big bets. Let's see which hands really want to shove. So, sorry. So the hands which really want to shove, it's quite a common theme. The hands which love to do overbet shoves are going to be the bottom end of the straight draws, and also the top end of the straight draws as well a little bit. But our most frequent combo is going to be this king four off. King 4 and 7 6 5. It folds out King Queen, King Jack, King 10 straight away, which is great for us. It folds out Ace King, which is great for us. And it has equity against a bunch of stuff. So if we do get called by Jacks, it has equity. It has the overcard as well as having an open-ended straight draw. So we can just see here, when we go in, our opponent will fold Ace King, Ace Queen, Ace Jack, King Jack, King Queen, Queen Jack, etc. It seems like we want to have a lot of small sizings here and half pot sizing. So let's see which hands want to go into the half pot. So we can see that our 7x typically wants to go into this bigger sizing. Our 8x typically wants to go into the bigger sizing. Whereas the 5x and our 6x, our bottom pair and our second pair, they're not trying to just slam all the money in like we would be off 10 big blinds or maybe from the button where the button has a wider range. If we do get called, we're not going to be in great shape. The imposition doesn't have as much 7x and 8x, etc. that we're going to have okay equity against. So, yeah, we go for the small sizing, which is the bet 11. Our opponent basically never folds. I again think this is pretty unrealistic. So I believe King Queen off, King Jack off, King Queen suited, no backdoor flush draw. I believe these hands will fold. So what I'm going to do is just a little bit of a node lock here. I'm going to node lock what our opponent is going to do versus the small bet and see if we end up having 0% checks. Because I believe we're going to have 0% checks here. So I'm just going to run this and I will show you in 1 second. So I've let this load up and we can see here that our check-in frequency has not changed much. All I've allowed is a small sizing and a shove. So really small, 20%, 25%, and really big all in, more than 2.5x pot. And we can see that our frequency doesn't change that much. What I want to see here is that, like we spoke about, when we do bet small, what is our opponent continuing with? What's it folding? So I believe we're going to get slightly more folds. And when we do that, I'm going to then show you the answer. Okay, so this is ran now. We're going to go to the root. We can see here that when our opponent just folds, so I'm just going to show you the response. If our opponent just folds King, Queen, Queen, Jack, King, Jack, King 10, which are like very intuitive folds, still calls most, Ace 10s, Ace Jack, still calls, you know, these hands, Ace 3s, and whatever else may be in there, like Jack 10 suited. Like, even if these hands are calling, most of the time, we end up having 100% lead in range here from the big blind. So I think that's pretty interesting. So yeah, I think this is good. I believe that you can be intuitive in game thinking about, okay, is my opponent going to be folding this? Is he not going to be folding this? Is my opponent the kind of guy to fold two overcards with nothing going on, like a King Jack off here? If he is, we can just start betting hands small, which we would normally have in our checking range. The EV is going to go up a lot. You've seen our EVs going up here to 28.4, and yeah, it's going to be a really good strategy. We still have, what's interesting here is we still have hands which want to shove, even though he's going to be overfolding, quote unquote. We still want to shove some hands. So hands like 7-2, 7-3, 7-4, they just want to get in as much money as possible. So when we have a hand like a 7, which is a top pair, which is really strong, can get called by worse hands, but it doesn't block any overcards, those are the ones we typically want to fast play. And 4x again is naturally going to go into our big bet range, but we also don't mind going small with these hands, because if we go small with these hands, our opponents are already node locked to fold these ace jacks, ace 10s, king queens, king queens, king 10s, etc. So that's going to also help us, because when we go small, King 4's EV is going to be okay because Ace King is folded, etc. However, if Ace King always calls, which it may do here anyway, now Ace King's folding sometimes. If Ace King always calls, then King 4 would go into that bucket of shoving. Anyway, I've spoken almost an hour about this now. I don't want to give you guys too much information in terms of, you know, explaining too many different things. I want to give you an overview. Hopefully now you can use your poker IQ to make these decisions in game. I think you're going to realize from this that having a donk shove range on the flop at 10, 12, 15 big blinds, especially from the button, is going to be a very, very effective strategy. And it's going to help us. We've seen by not having this, the EV of our strategy getting to the flop is going to be significantly less than when we have a shove in here. And yeah, It's not going to make you a winning player from a losing player, but adding up all of these significant EV changes together is what's going to make you a winning player or a better winning player or a high ROI player. So yeah, going to finish this now, and this is going to be the end of the whole donk and the flop little